All right, I reckon we get going, Tim. Go, mate.
Okay, fantastic. So welcome everybody to Pumping Up Project Value. This is the fourth session of what has been a successful masterclass put on by Orchestra and all about successfully selling C&I, solar and batteries. So we're excited to be back here again. We did have this session down for Chris Cooper, but I'm standing in for him. He's terribly busy improving the website. So the aims here are just to deeply understand your customers' needs, coming up with solutions that match those needs, and then communicating them really clearly. And in this particular session, it's all about pumping up the value of those projects. So we're going to draw on all the different elements we've had in the first three webinars, and then really try and show you how to visualize and articulate what the value is, so that you can pump up the value of your proposals, win business and win bigger business. And so, as said, we're going to be using the Q&A session for any questions. And then, so the welcome is now, and we'll have questions later on. Should be about 60 minutes runtime. And so let's jump in.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so we've been going this bit of a journey that started with this slide, right? And what the whole this whole masterclass has been about is about reorientating sales teams to start working in a way that is not orientated about trying to sell more product. It's orientated around trying to have more consultative, more trusting relationships with their customers. And so what we have been showing people along the way is moving to this what we call the feasibility first method, and by doing so, that you can start to build those trusted relationships with customers. And the critical part here is that rather than sort of going in with a preordained view of like what the system needs to be, because you're doing the technical design first, you're front loading the feasibility and you're doing that part first, right? And that allows you to test lots and lots of different solutions, refine the projects with your customers, and then from that, the proposal that you're sending out is actually the proposal for the thing that the customer actually wants, not a stab in the dark of what the customer might buy. And so today we're actually going to be putting all of this together and actually showing this in the pumping up project value. And this is where we can really clearly demonstrate that doing the feasibility first is going to be really quite game changing for the way that you're going to be able to think about projects, but also the types of projects that you can sell. So what goes alongside this feasibility first method is the need to kind of operate in a really consultative way with the customer. So it starts off with who the customer is, what's their role, who makes the decisions, and how are they making the decisions? Why is the customer talking to you? Really trying to get to the bottom of that. Like, what is their driver to go and install solar and batteries? Is it about trying to reduce their bills? Is it about carbon? Is it about energy independence? Is it about improving the reliability of their supply? All of these can be reasons for going after solar and batteries. And the more you understand the why of someone wanting this, the better that you can present solutions that will match that why. The how is what Orchestra does, right? It allows you to test like the how we're going to do it. So we're going to be able to pull lots and lots of different levers to ultimately zero in on the what, which is the final solution that you're going to present to a customer. We also talked about a design process where when you start off, you're going to really explore the problem through process of discovery, asking lots of questions. From that discovery, you're going to zero in and converge on like, what is it that you're going to decide to fix? Like how, customer might have a whole range of different problems, of which only some of them that you can solve for. And even then you want to try and zero in on like, what is the problem that they've got, which is the biggest impact. And Chris, in the first webinar, talked about the 5 whys process. So if someone tells you something like, I really want solar, and you go, well, why? And then they'll be like, well, I heard it's a good idea. And you're like, well, why? And then, well, because that person that I spoke to got massive bill savings. And it's that process of like asking why, but in a conversational way, obviously, that is going to allow you to zero in on like where's the kind of opportunity to really provide a game-changing impact for customers. So deciding on what you're going to fix, and then using the Orchestra tool, being able to go through a design process where you can test lots and lots of different solutions. And we talked about that a lot in the second webinar, and then being able to converge in on the solution that delivers the most value. And so typical thing that might happen is customer comes to you and has a specific solar system in mind. You start asking why, you get to what they're trying to actually achieve, then you can test lots of different solutions to be able to achieve that, and then you can work with the customer to zero in on the optimal solution. And the process that you're following through Orchestra is you're understanding their needs, getting their bills, getting their load data, starting the solution analysis, then sending out feasibility analysis to a customer, getting their feedback, potentially showing them all the different permutations of project. Like we'll be doing that today, and you might feel comfortable to sit with a customer and actually work live with a customer in the Orchestra tool, sending out like these dashboards, packaging it up in an email. And some of you may have noticed I even had the example copy of this email in that email that went out as one of the assets you can take away from this course. And then iterating on this. So you're getting the customer feedback, you're using that customer feedback to then adjust the way that you might present the solution. And then you're going around and around until you get the customer says, yep, I like that. And then you're setting out the proposal. And then the proposal is the cherry on top of this process, right? It's the thing that the customer can actually engage and sign with. But the idea is that by the time you've got to a proposal, you've pretty much nailed what the customer wants. You're not sending out a proposal which is a stab in the dark. This process, in theory, within our software, can be super, super fast, right? And when you're presenting to a customer, obviously we want you to keep coming back to the why. So, customer's going to tell you what their business drivers are, repeat them, right? So the customer might say, look, I'm trying to, I want a solar and battery solution. And the reason is that we're trying to reduce our costs. Well, you say, right, we heard that you wanted to reduce your costs. We looked at solutions that would enable that. We tested a range of different potential solutions that might fix that problem, including solar and batteries and tariff changes. And here's 3 options that we think are going to be very effective of being able to deliver on that. In the last webinar, we talked about different financial metrics that you really need to get really fluent in. And the importance of being able to start talking really comfortably around net present value and IRR, being able to explain this to customers if they don't understand them, but also when you're talking to a customer that does understand them, definitely using them to your advantage and being able to talk really fluently to those. And that an IRR in particular is a really fantastic way of comparing different types of investment. So if someone comes to you and says, oh, look, I can get 8.5% in my property trust, and you can present them projects with a 16% IRR, that you're actually comparing apples with apples there, and you can show a customer like this is a good investment, and it pulls you away from conversations about payback period, which are really unhelpful for projects which have a very long-term cash flow, and it means that you can start to actually get to a point where a customer is looking at these investments in a way that's actually pragmatic. And the final thing that we talked about in the last webinar was the importance of particularly financing to be able to knock down some of the most important objections that a customer is going to have. So, the highest or the most common objection that solar companies told us that they were facing in that last webinar was that customers don't have the budget. Well, financing is the solution to that, and you can use a range of different financing methods to be able to address concerns for a customer. And our tool using business model builders a really fantastic way of being able to do that. So now we're going to take all of that and we're going to put it all together in pumping up the project value, right? So what we've got today is a series of recipes that you can use that you can take projects up to a whole new level. And really the sort of process here is like using Orchestra to add a bunch of different levers to actually achieve a much bigger outcome. I'm going to be running through this one a little bit later, but I think this is a really good example of like the type of thing that you can do. So in the case of this brewery, we've got a brewery with a 180 megawatt hour consumption. It's a large customer when we're thinking about retail bills. So when you receive the bills from this customer, it'll be unbundled. You'll see demand line items on the bill. That customer using solar and batteries can be taken down to being a small customer, which means that we can completely remove their demand charges on the bill. And so when you're looking at just solar, this is not going to work for this customer. A 100 kilowatt solar system would have a negative net present value. So overall, it's going to cost the customer. If you added a battery to it, it could slightly improve the net present value, but still very negative. But you add the tariff change on top, it can totally transform the value that you're going to get for the customer. And we'll go through this example today and actually take you through the individual parts of this, of like how you set this up, and look at what happens if you just do the tariff change. And I can show you that that's actually going to produce a negative outcome as well. So 1 + 1 + 1 does not equal 3. It can be much, much greater than 3, right? And it's about understanding the types of recipes that you can use to actually have a transformational effect to the economics of your projects. So here's 8 different things that we think that you can use. And we're going to go through 6 of these. It's the 6 of the left slide, the ones that are starred. I would encourage you to go back and watch the Exploring Energy Business Models webinar series to actually go into the details of like how to do this. But the ones that we think can be very, very impactful are looking at the changing retail and network tariffs. So for example, if you're come to a small business customer and they're on a flat rate tariff, when you add solar and batteries, moving them to a time of use tariff can actually increase the value substantially. The example I just showed you before is where we lower the consumption below a large customer threshold and we move them out of demand tariffs back into small business tariffs, and you're using solar and batteries to be able to do that. Upgrading the network connection, and Tim's going to talk to that one today around the effect that can have on a project. It can be absolutely transformational to a solar and battery project by increasing the network connection size. Optimizing government subsidies. So you want to look at all the different options that are there. Don't just assume that it's SDCs and LGCs or whatever. Think through, like particularly for VEECs, which Tim's going to go through, does that improve the economics? Connecting a solar battery project to a virtual power plant is a way of really turbocharging the economics for batteries. And then finally adding backup power. And these are not all equal in terms of the complexity. So we've kind of like ranked these highest to lowest in terms of the complexity of implementing these different options. Some are very, very easy. Obviously, optimizing a subsidy is going to be extremely easy. But they can have a big impact on different types of problems that you're trying to solve for. And what I've tried to do with this slide, and a little bit similar to a previous slide that I've shown you, is that you can use these recipes in different times to be an enabler or a direct solution to one of these different problems or issues. So for example, my bills are too high, trying to get a customer under the large customer threshold and removing the demand tariffs off the bill can be a direct solution to solving that particular problem. This slide, I hope, becomes a really useful reference point for if you're coming up against these different types of problems that you're solving for a customer. You're able to then find some of these recipes, use these recipes when you're talking to a customer. And we're going to go through 6 of them today. So that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Tim, and Tim's going to take you through 3 of the recipes. And then I'm going to take you through the second round of 3. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just dive in. Okay, hopefully you can all see that.
We can.
Thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to jump through three of them and then hand back to James. So the first one is looking at subsidies. And so obviously the three big ones are the STCs, LGCs, and VEECs. VEECs are only applicable for Victoria, obviously. And I'm going to assume that you've got reasonable knowledge of what these are. Clearly, VEECs are more related to reducing energy consumption, while the other two are more related to renewable energy generation. But we want to actually articulate what is exactly the difference in using one or a mix of them. And so to do that, I'm just going to jump across to a little example I prepared earlier. So this is the example CNI project, which is by default should be in your account on Orchestra, so you should be able to jump in. In this case, I've actually updated the Simplo property by moving it to Geelong. Go Cats. But otherwise, it's the same. And so you can see here, I've created 4 different scenarios with different considerations here. And so if I just jump into this one, the STC one, the simple one, the way that we nominate this, or the way that we update this, is we jump into the solar PV selection. And once we've selected the profile and the different systems, we scroll down a bit, we get to the incentives section at the bottom. And down here is where all the goodness happens. So in this case, I've turned on the STCs. You can nominate what STC you want to use. Obviously, that varies over time. But we put in the system default is going to be the latest number. And then also you've got the opportunity to turn on LGCs. And again, here you've got default numbers, but you can put in your own numbers. And then also for VEECs, if relevant, and this is where you can put in your VEECs numbers. Again, I won't go into those in detail right now because it's a little bit detailed, but all the variables are there. So I'm just going to log out of that. So I've now got these 4 different scenarios that I've created. So it's otherwise the same. All I've done is change those different subsidies. So what I can do here is move down, and I've run this previously, and you can see we've got our lovely stack ranking. So we're seeing that for this scenario with STCs, I'm looking at the net present value as the metric upon which we base the comparison. And we can see the different systems of different sizes going down. So what I'm going to do actually here to be able to see the value and compare them is I'm going to click right here, and I'm actually going to select all scenarios. And now, as if by magic, you can see I've starred the best NPV value for each of the 4 different scenarios. And you can see there's significant difference in the NPV of those different scenarios. So let's see if we can understand that a little bit better. So what I'm going to do here is I've moved from, that's the key metrics, I've clicked on custom chart, and I'm going to go over here and choose the color. And I'm going to go down and choose scenarios. And so as if by magic, I've now got a fantastic visual showing those 4 different scenarios with the different subsidies. So the first thing we're going to notice here is that just with STCs on their own, they're usually going to have the lower NPVs, which is kind of what we'd expect. But what's interesting up here in this scenario is that we've got the VEECs tend to be the higher value systems, which is great. So you can see visually really clearly exactly what the difference is in value there with the VEECs and with others. So what I'm going to do here is go into, to visualize this a little bit more clearly, I'm going to go into the different solar sizes. So I'm going to break it down by solar size. So here now you can see that what I've got bunched here is these are the different solar system sizes that we're looking at. So you can see here that the best system that we've got here is the 600 kilowatt system. And you can see, but what's interesting here is that the NPVs of the best systems, you can see clearly how they compare across the different system sizes. And so you could very well look at if your client is interested in having a smaller solar system, but with the same NPV, it could be there. But similarly, if you want to ramp up there to a bigger system, a bigger solution, with a similar NPV, you can see exactly how that's going to play out. So that's really handy there. Obviously, you can scroll down here and see the different values of those systems. So just to make the point on that, you can really articulate what the difference is with those different subsidies and really see how it's going to impact the different value of the different proposals.
And I think there's another thing that just before we move on is that LGCs and VEEC markets are always changing. So they're spot price markets, meaning that every day there's a different price. And so it's really important to, like, this isn't going to always be the case. You need to be constantly coming back to this and actually checking the difference between these different options and making sure that it is the case. You can't just go in and assume that VEECs are always going to be the best, because the spot price might change and then suddenly it's different. So it is important to test every time, particularly when you're in Victoria.
Yeah, thanks, James. So I'm going to skip this 2 and 3 and jump straight to 4. So here we're looking at the benefits of a network upgrade. So this is quite often for an installer, it's a painful part of the process because you've got to go and apply to the network and find out whether you can export to the grid, and if you can, how much, and potentially if you're putting a bigger system on, how much it's going to cost you. But this can potentially be a way to boost your proposal and can be much more accurate if done with our modeling. So I'm just going to jump into another example I've got here that I've prepared earlier. So in this case, we're back to the example CNI project, which you've all got by default. And we're back in New South Wales with Simplo in Bathurst here. And so I'll just jump into when you're setting up your system, as you guys might know, you've got different, hang on.
That's right.
Yeah, so you've got different size grid connections. So these boxes, obviously, they can be populated or unpopulated. If you leave them unpopulated, the system will just take by default that it won't consider the export or the import. So we generally recommend that you do at least put in some values so that you're keeping it as realistic as possible. So just best guess is better than leaving it blank, although you can leave it blank. And so in this case, we're just going to assume, okay, it's 100 kilowatt is the export limit. And we really want to know what happens if we've got a bigger export limit, what's going to be the impact of that. So in this case, just going to jump back to the main screen. So the way I've done that is I've actually just got a single scenario, which is still the same one, but I've clicked into other changes. And here you can see that I've added, so we've got the export limit and I've got 100 kilowatts. That's what we've already got. But in this green box, I've said, what happens if we went up to a 500 kilowatt limit? And you will put in an upfront cost here as well. So this would be determined through your conversations with the network provider. Hopefully you've got ideally some sort of relationship with your local DNSP and you've got some idea of what the upfront costs are going to be. But once you can estimate them, but once you know what they are, we can come back to this. Also, we can calculate and see what would be an acceptable upfront cost and still have an economically positive outcome for your client. So I've set up the 2 changes here. We've got an export limit of 100 and an export limit of 500. What's the difference between the two? So what I've done here is we've got the key metrics, and you can see I've starred the best NPV for the 2 different scenarios, but let's see what they look like. So I'm going to click onto the custom chart. And again, I'm going to go for my color selector, and I'm going to say, let's look at the site baseline versus adjusted. And so this immediately gives us a really nice view, which again suggests that if, not unexpectedly, but if we increase the export limit from 100 kilowatts to 500 kilowatts, kilowatt hours, then we can see that there's an enormous benefit in doing that. And in fact, we can see how much the benefit is in terms of net present value. So you can see here that just click on that one there. With the 100 kilowatt export, you're looking at a system that is got a net present value of $943,000. But with the extra export, that jumps all the way up to 1.27 million. Which is fantastic. So you're able to clearly see here what is the value of increasing your export. And obviously, that's for a number of reasons, particularly if you're doing FCAS and wholesale arbitrage and all that good stuff as well. But so you can actually quantify what the difference is. And so let's just jump in there now, and I'm going to also rank that by solar size. And so again, here you can see, you can start to really see where the value is. So if you weren't doing this and you were just looking at the baseline, your business case that you're taking to the client is a 200 kilowatt hour battery and a 600 kilowatt system. Whereas if you understand that this is a more valuable system, it's also a bigger system. So now you're jumping up to the 800 kilowatt solar and the 500 kilowatt hour battery. So your proposal just got a lot bigger whilst increasing the net present value for the client. So they're getting a better outcome, and you've got a bigger proposal, and everybody's happy with that. And so you can also, the reason I left the dollar value of this increase at 0 is because I wanted to show what the difference was there. But so one of the main points here is you can use that net present value as an indicator of how much cost you would find acceptable from the network for the upgrade works, and still be in a positive economic scenario, still have a better outcome for the client. And so it's going to be about that $300,000 difference. So you might say, I can pay the network up to $300,000 and still give the client a better outcome than otherwise. So it's not just that you've got a bigger deal, you can also articulate exactly how much you can pay and still be in a positive position. So again, really powerful for that. The numbers are going to vary, but it may very much be worth getting a higher export, even if it's going to cost you money, and you can see exactly how much money you should be spending on that. James is quiet, so I assume I covered all the hot points.
No, you did a great job. Thanks, Tim.
So the last one is your backup power. And I think this is particularly a strong one for the depth of the conversation that you're having with your client. Obviously, some clients don't get outages, they don't care, it's not a big deal. But when you have a client who is maybe has heavy dependence on refrigeration, so it could be a dairy farmer, or it could be a medical facility or something like that, or indeed where you've got life support systems and they really do need to have, there's a huge downside to having power cuts. This is a way that you can ask those questions, get really deep in the discovery and understand, and we can use the tool to understand exactly what the value of that is. And the more valuable or the more downside to a blackout, the more valuable it is to install a system, and we can actually value that for you. So this is a great way to present a case that is more valuable to them and a larger system for you. So I'm going to flick over to my other saved job here. So again, I'm back to the example CNI project. We're back in Bathurst. And I've created a scenario here with outages valued. So the way that I've done that is I've gone to the connections, and I've just clicked on this little button here, access grid outages here. So once I've done that, you'll notice that as I proceed, I now have a new section called grid outages appearing on the website. And when I get to it, we can see a whole lot of settings here. So our head of product, Chris, went to great pains to explain to me, this is actually really sophisticated in the back end. It does a lot of randomized sampling of different scenarios. So it's actually very powerful in terms of forecasting. A really quick run through here. We can look at and this is probably potentially a good thing to have open while you're talking to your client, because you can show them the depth of analysis that you can do. So first of all is the severity. We've got mild, moderate, severe, and you can see how that varies there. So this is where you're looking at what's the duration and of the different outages. And you can actually edit those. You can jump in and say, okay, I get about 30 sub 1 second, and I get about 2 12-hour per year. And you can vary that manually if you want to do that. Otherwise, you can just click on these guys here, and it gives you a nice summary of what we're talking about. So the most severe, you're talking about a little bit less than 3% as downtime. Mild is much closer to 1%. So that's a good start. You can go further if the timings, you can say to the client, when do these things happen? If they say, oh, look, they're completely random, you go with any time. If they say, well, actually, you know what, they generally don't happen at night because demand on the grid is lower at night, and they tend to be more likely in summer because that's when a lot of air conditioning going on. So that's where we tend to get more outages. So we can do that. We can also then look at the backup load. So we might say, look, we need to look at the backing up for the entire site. The whole property needs to be backed up. Or you might say, well, actually, we've got a couple of fridges which we really can't afford to have going offline, and they need 50 kilowatts to run. And so the system's going to model whether or not that threshold is passed when it's working out the impact of this. The last one here, and this is really the good bit, is how much is it costing you as a client if these happen? So we can either look at a simpler version with it's the same cost every time that there's an outage, or you can actually say, no, if the outage is on the weekends or the weekdays in between different times, I can actually nominate different values. It might be that during the weekend, the impact is not as high because your operations are not as critical because you haven't got clients in the building or whatever. Anyway, so there's a lot of settings that can be done there. So we can just look at the impact on that again really quickly. So I've got outages. I've got two scenarios: outages valued, outages not valued. And so if I come down to my little table here, again, the key metrics will show the distribution of all the different scenarios. If I go into my custom chart and I go into the color section again, I can compare those two scenarios.
You just need to turn your scenarios on.
Oh, that's right. This is something I've just discovered recently, this fantastic little button here. So I only had one of the scenarios selected there. When I click them both on, I can now see them head to head. And so again, a bit similar to what we saw before, the MPV where we do value the cost of those outages is significantly higher than where we don't. So this is something where you're helping your client and you're also getting a much higher value in the proposal. So again, let's have a quick look at what that looks like with the different solar sizes. And again, you can see the relative MPV of the different system sizes. So 500 and 600 look fairly similar.
What happens if you change that to battery sizes, Tim? Like if you change the x-axis to battery sizes?
Okay, look at the difference there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. Massively increased. And this is something that's really common across lots of battery value stacking. This is essentially what we're doing here, is that when you stack different value on top of each other, not only does it improve the economics of the system, but it also increases the optimal size of the system as well. So this is a great way of demonstrating it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the client should be happy at the notion of a significantly larger system.
Yeah, Tim, can you just quickly show us, like, how do you, once you've set up the grid outages in the site, where do we have to select it in the scenario?
I do beg your pardon. So if we go into the battery settings, we do need to make sure that we have a control profile which includes backup power. So there are some settings there that I won't go into right now, but you do need to have this nominated. So when the two scenarios that I just created, one was with this toggle selected, the other one was without, well, also in the initial scenario setting. So apologies, I missed that bit. So you've got, just to recap, you've got two things. One is you've got to go into connection and make sure you've got this toggle selected. And then number two is you need to make sure that the battery is ready to perform that action as well. So you do that by clicking in the battery section there, and then that's where we choose it with the control profile.
Awesome.
Okay,
Good
that's
stuff.
me. I'm going to throw back to here and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks very much, Tim. All right, I'm going to go take this one on. All right, so I'm going to go through 3 more recipes, 2 which are very much around tariffs and working with tariffs, and the last one, which is the virtual power plant one as well, and showing you the impact of these different options. The first one's really simple, and like I think it's probably an obvious one that many people will be aware of, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to do this tariff comparison in the tool. And that's just looking at swapping up retail or network tariffs in the tool when you've added solar and battery solutions. And so let's just go and swap into this tariff change option. So I've actually used the example small business project that you'll have available to you when you set up your account. And in here, it's a small business, so it's in a small a customer threshold of 100 megawatt hours, and we've got a flat rate tariff for this customer. So I've gone and set up this tariff, and it just has two line items on the bill: the fixed charge and the anytime charge. What I also did was I've indexed these so that the bill before is the exact same price regardless of whether you're on a time of use or you've got an anytime. So I've adjusted the price here to make sure that you get the exact same price for both of them. So when you what you can now do is when you set up your solar and battery profiles, you can also use the compare tariff section, and in here you've got the option to add different tariffs to it. And so I've set up my tariffs here. I'll just show you the two different ones that I've set up. So one here has got a 31 cents per kilowatt hour for anytime usage, and the time of use tariff that we've got that we've set up here has actually got a peak of 43 cents, a shoulder of 38 cents, and an off peak of 19 cents. Which on face value you might be like, oh, those peak and shoulders, those are pricey. But what we can do is really avoid them using our solar and battery. So I've actually gone for a very simple battery setup here. I've just gone for some alpha ESS batteries. I've just used the standard battery sizes here, and I've used the solar self-consumption control profile. So just the simple rules-based control profile that's within the software. This would be the standard out-of-the-box control that you could get for any one of these battery systems. And then I've run this different scenario here, and then down to our chart, and we've got all of our results here. If we now swap to custom chart and we turn on the retail tariff, and then we go and have a look at ranking by solar size, I actually see the impact of changing, going between the tariff changes here. So you can see actually over the whole course of the project, swapping to a time of use tariff would have a small benefit of 8,500. But when you add the solar and batteries in, we're going to see a very significant benefit from swapping from the flat rate to a time of use. So the optimal system size, so I'll just go back to this, is a 80 kilowatt system with a 41 kilowatt hour battery. So now if I go and rank these by this, we can see this is our optimal system size here. Turn on my retail tariff. If I go and find the same battery within the results, which is that one there, we can see that it improves the net present value by $35,000. That's just the tariff change, right? Just a simple swap between one to the other tariff, which might, on the face of it, look like it's might be quite expensive, but actually could lead to a significant improvement on the economics of the project. And if we think about that from an IRR perspective, we've actually gone from a 17% IRR to a 20% IRR. So that could be the difference of a 6.1 year payback to nearly 5-year payback. So again, important not to just focus on the technologies. We've got to think of all the levers that we're pulling here, and tariffs is one of them. So we turbocharge this up, and now we look at reducing a site below the threshold. So here I've set up the same site. This is actually, we've got this example as the standard example when you look at this example project, small business example project. So it's currently sitting in the large customer threshold at 150 megawatt hours, about 50 megawatt hours over that threshold. So pretty far above. Difficult to achieve just by doing energy efficiency measures, but very easy to achieve using solar and batteries. Got the same spread of solar and battery solutions here. The significant difference is that here we've had a time of use demand tariff, and now I've gone to I've swapping to having a time. We're going from that large customer tariff to a time of use tariff. You also, and this is something you'll have to build from scratch, is to create a no network tariff. There's no way, unfortunately, in our software, is a bit of an oversight for us of forcing this to happen. The way that you do this is just set up some really small, insignificant charge, like 0.1 cent per day as a fixed charge, and then it won't affect the economics of the project. So make sure that when you do it, you've got your time of use and your no network tariff. And then when you run it, you're going to get a whole bunch of different results. And it's a little bit of work to kind of tease out the one that you want. But if we start starring off and we start having a look at like the optimal sizes here, what do we need? So if we find our baseline version. So these ones here we've actually got to ignore. This is the initial tariff with no network tariff. This is something that I'd actually really like to change in our software. What we're actually looking for here is we need to go and turn on the network tariff change. So we've got to find the ones with the no network tariff, but we've got to also look for the ones that have now got the time of use tariff. And you can see here that here's the optimal one. This is the one that we actually want here. So this is where we've now found the optimal solution for this particular site is a 100 kilowatt system with a 49 kilowatt hour battery. And if we go and find the corresponding system in the where we've got no tariff change, it is site default, time of use. Okay, find my change to my retail tariff, so it might be easier to wait to it. Yeah, so now we're here we go. Yeah, I might need to change this to solar sizes. That's going to make my life a lot easier. So here's the site default. So these are the ones here with no change to the tariff. Actually, what I've done is I've ranked these by solar sizes, and now we can really start to very, very clearly see the impact on the as a result of that tariff change. So this is the one here that has the same solar system size and the same battery size, but we've got the site defaults, the original tariffs that we were aiming to have for this. And here's the impact of now changing the tariff on the site. If we want to actually just look at like what's the impact of changing the tariff and not not installing the solar and battery systems, and it's not the impact of just the tariff here that's making this change. This would be the cost to the customer. Now they can't obviously get to this because they're not in a small customer range, but it would be a very negative result for a customer just to swap from that tariff. What we've got here is the combination of multiple solutions. So we're going from putting in our solar and battery system, making the tariff change, and then as a result of the sum of the parts, we're actually increasing up to a very, very valuable project. And we're going from something like 11 years for this large system to now seven years and nearly 14% internal rate of return. So again, message here, don't just look at the solar and batteries, think about the tariff change, think about the network changes, because it can be quite a game changer to the project when you're looking to pump up the value. The final one is virtual power plants. So this is the solution, obviously, that Orchestra was originally known for. We built our software to go and model batteries that incorporate virtual power plant revenues into them. And the way to actually set this up is, and you'll find this example in this CNI project example, is within the battery control. When you're setting up a different control profile, you can set up an optimized or rule-based control. So rule-based is purely reactive. It just looks at the interval in front of it and makes a decision on what to do as a result of like what's its current state of charge and what's the opportunity. So if you have, say, you set a trigger for it to discharge into the wholesale market at $1,000 a megawatt hour, and then 3 intervals down, there's a $10,000 a megawatt hour event. Tough luck, you'll miss that event. Optimization is smart, so it knows, it assumes that there's a degree of forecasting, and you've got a capability of waiting for better events. So we're now starting to see a bit of a duck curve occurring within the pricing of the market, and a forecasting engine that is attached to an optimizer will be able to wait into the afternoon if it sees an opportunity that might be better in that afternoon. And so we've built these two different types of control profiles for you to use. When you're setting up your virtual power plant, you can choose the different value stacks you want to include in this. So here I've ticked on wholesale market arbitrage and contingency FCAS. This is what we call the full value stack that's available to a commercial industrial battery. But these are hard to go after, right? So if we, in terms of complexity, to actually enable a battery to go and participate in these markets, this is probably the most complex type of project that you'll come across, because it requires you to be across the type of control system that is going to be used for this site, and it also requires you to have a way of accessing these markets. So if you go and buy a battery and you just install it and you do nothing else, the battery will not participate in wholesale and FCAS. It requires you to go an extra step further to make sure you've got some aggregator that's providing access to the markets, that's doing the control, optimizing the control. And there's parties out there that will provide those services, people like PowerSync, who's a customer of ours, Momentum, Hydro Momentum provide this service. There's others as well that will enable you access into these markets. But it is the one that we caution people to really make sure you've got all your ducks in a row before you start promising the earth to customers. The good thing though is that it can be have a dramatic impact on the economics of solar and battery projects, and can be a complete enabler for them. So I'm going to do the same thing that Tim was showing. I'm going to turn on all 3 scenarios here. I've got a lot of different scenarios, as you can see in this chart. But if we turn on the colors and we actually have a look at the colors, we can see how the difference between no virtual power plant and including the full virtual power plant in the light blue here can actually quite significantly improve the economics. And if we look at like the optimal battery sizes as well, this is not as clear as I'd hoped, we can actually see that the as you're moving up from the light blue up into the pinks, we can actually improve the optimal economic sizes. What I can do is, I think it'd probably be clearer if I turn this off. So if I go and change this and I find the optimal size for my battery by using this one. So we're going to choose, I'm going to star this one here. So this is our 100 kilowatt battery system. And then we turn on VPP Lite, where we're just participating in the wholesale market, but not FCAS. I'm going to save that one as well. And then now we've got the full battery value stack, which includes the FCAS. And so when we now put all of these together on the custom chart, we can see the relative positions of them. And we rank these by battery size. Oh, sorry, not that one. Battery size, and then turn on our scenarios. We can actually see that by adding the virtual power plant value, we've actually lifted the battery up quite significantly. We've doubled the optimal size for this particular battery by adding the virtual power plant revenue. Now, in this particular example, I've obviously got quite low FCAS year, so it's not adding a super amount of value to it. Oh, and I've got a very aggressive de-escalator on the FCAS to really sort of tamp down the value. You may have markets where there's more FCAS value, and then you'll see even more, even bigger lift in the battery sizes. So as you're adding the different value stacks together, what you'll expect to see is that the optimal size gets moved up and up and up. So that's it. Those are the 6 different recipes that we're going to go through today, or we've gone through today. In every single case, what we're really encouraging you to do is make sure you think about other stuff, not just the technology. Think about the tariffs that the customer could be on. Think about the network connection and if that can be improved. Think about the different value stacks that might be available to a battery. That could be adding backup power. It could be adding virtual power plant revenues. These are all significant levers that you can pull, and in every single case, it's the sum of the parts that ultimately results in really really big improvements to economics of these projects. So as homework, obviously this is our final webinar. We really encourage you to go and use the software. Go and have a go at trying to pump up the project value. Have a go at the business model builder and see, use that leverage financing that we talked about as a mechanism for pumping up project value as well. And test it out. See if you can really change the economics of projects. And you might actually have some projects that didn't proceed recently because the economics weren't good enough. It would be great to go back to some of those projects and actually see if by pulling these levers, can you sufficiently enough change the economics for a project that the project can proceed? I think that'd be a pretty amazing outcome if you could achieve that. So that's it from us. I'm hoping we got lots of questions.
I think we did get one question. So Naeem, if I'm saying that correctly, how long do you reckon it takes for grid upgrades? In my experience, it takes at least 18 months or over. I'm wondering if we're trying to get project economics right for a grid upgrade, if we're trying to get them up right, how the assumptions, escalators, and any incentives would be in real time in post 18 months.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's something we can't do today is actually change the timing of thing. It assumes that when you're doing the project, it's all happening at the same time. There's all the expenses are in month 0. You can though pull out the costs. So what we probably want to do in that scenario is probably run Orchestra a couple of times, export the cash flows out of the project. So export the cash flows for the smaller system, or export the cash flows for the larger system with the grid constraint applied, and then export the cash flows for the larger system with the new export limit, and then merge them together in Excel, and then redo your net present value and IRR calculations after doing that. Yeah, at some point, no doubt will probably allow you to specify the exact time of when that upgrade could occur. So if you did install the system and then it wasn't for another 12 to 18 months that the upgrade occurred, you'd be able to model that straight into the software. Bear with us. It's a little bit hacky to do that workaround.
Okay, that's all the actual topical questions. We've got some about, just to reiterate, this recording, and in fact, links to all 4 of the masterclass videos will be sent by email after this event. And so don't worry, you'll receive those. If you don't, just send an email to support@orchestra.energy and we'll furnish you with that video goodness.
Yeah, and I've got another question here around the training videos. So there's a whole stack of different videos that are in the knowledge base. So you can follow those if you need any help kind of going through. There's also all the videos from the previous sessions that you'll have access to, and also the business model builder section. You can hop onto the blog of our Orchestra blog, and you'll find links to the Exploring Energy Business Models series and the videos that are there to support you on that one.
Yep, I've just got a note here, I think, from Tess just saying, please check your junk mail. Sometimes things get lost in the junk mail. Again, if there's an issue, let us know.
Great.
And that's 3 minutes to go. Perfect timing, James.
Yeah, I think we might have an early minute unless there's no other questions. Thanks very much, everyone. It's been fantastic taking you through this webinar series. I hope that you have some great success out there with this injection of knowledge and the orchestra software. So yeah, look out for us in the future. We're going to be holding additional webinars coming up. We're planning to do one on energy markets soon, and I'm partnering with a couple of partners to deliver that one. So that'll be fantastic, particularly if you're trying to get in and understand virtual power plants and start having conversations with customers about how a battery behind the meter participates in front of the meter and what that all means. That'll be a fantastic one to look out for. Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks,
everyone.